This is Inside the Commission, a Gambling Commission podcast. Welcome to Inside the Commission, a podcast all about gambling in Great Britain. Here we'll cover all the latest topics and trends from across the gambling sector and discuss the big issues that matter to you. From consumer queries to industry insights, we'll bring you the facts from the front line of regulation and share the stats and stories from those in the know. For all the latest discussions and updates, you can subscribe to our Gambling Commission YouTube channel, or you can find us on your preferred platform, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Right, hello and welcome both. My name's Anna and we're going to be looking at the illegal markets today in this episode to get an inside track on how seriously we are at the Gambling Commission taking that work. Joining me today is John Pearce, Director of Enforcement at the Gambling Commission, and Donna Duffy, Senior Intelligence Manager. We're going to be looking at all of those different aspects, but maybe should we start with you both and your careers today and how you've ended up in the roles that you're working in today?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. So I've been at the Gambling Commission since February 2024. Prior to that, I headed up the regional investigation team for National Trading Standards in the Northwest. So had a team of investigators, disclosure officers, financial investigation officers, and I also ran the intelligence function as well within that unit. I was with Trading Standards for just over 10 years. Prior to that, I worked for Cheshire Police as an accredited financial investigator, so really interested in proceeds of crime, and obviously some of the work the Commission's doing as well at the moment I'm finding really interesting. So yeah, that's my background.
Excellent, thanks John. What about you, Donna?
I started my career at Leicestershire Police as an analyst working on a division for volume crime, moving on to Special Operations Unit as an analyst there. And then I joined the Gangmasters and Labour Abuse Authority, joining as a senior analyst and moving up to be an intelligence analysis and research manager. And I was there for around 16 years in the end. I joined the Gambling Commission in January this year as the Senior Intel Manager.
So probably the next question is around how we talk about the illegal markets. There's a lot of terminology out there in the public domain. So illegal, unlicensed, what are the right words for us to describe what this is?
So as you say, there's lots of different terms, but in essence they do all mean the same thing. It's referred to as illegal gambling, we believe, is a sort of catch-all statement for what we're looking at here. And a lot of the discussion we're going to be going through today is looking at some of the issues that we're seeing online, for example. But the term is broader than that. Obviously, it covers the work that we're doing, land-based issues as well. So it's a broad wraparound term, but in essence, all of those terms mean the same thing.
Excellent. It's good to know that we're all on the same page when it comes to what we're talking about. One of the licensing objectives for the Gambling Commission is to prevent gambling from being a source of crime or disorder. So it's fair to assume we take this work very seriously. Do you want to tell us about what that looks like practically?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been a critical function for the enforcement team, certainly since I've been here, and obviously even prior to me actually joining the Gambling Commission. We've actually recognised it's a real issue out there that we need to go and focus on and try to tackle. Part of that is trying to get a ring-fence resource in place to actually try and focus on this area of work because it's so complex. So the Gambling Commission's investigated in an illegal markets function. That covers broadly two elements. One is some disruption type work that we're looking at for some of the online operators that are targeting GB customers. But we're also looking at broadening our criminal investigation functions as well. So that's looking at some of the land-based issues and some of the sports betting integrity issues as well. But what we found is, though, you have to have a resource that's readily available to react quickly to some of the issues that we're identifying, and that's been a real step forward for the Gambling Commission.
I think from an intelligence perspective as well, we receive high volumes of intelligence regarding the illegal market, and when we receive that intelligence, we'll be looking at doing some research to develop the intelligence, to try and corroborate the intelligence. So where there is high risk, particularly where vulnerable people are being targeted, underage customers or people that have previously self-excluded with licensed operators, they'll be then deemed higher risk, and we'll be packaging those up once we've developed the intelligence to go to our enforcement team. Just to give some figures in terms of the numbers we received, so since January this year, between January and August this year, we received over 2,000 reports concerning illegal markets, and we referred over 800 reports to our enforcement team.
Wow. So in terms as well then what the risks are to those consumers, because maybe that isn't necessarily that clear to people that are listening in. What does that look like in terms of how this impacts the general public or people that are gambling?
So I think one of the big takeaways from today is this isn't a harmless crime. So you look at it from a consumer harm perspective, you only have to look at how some of these websites are using sort of advertising options around, terms like not on GamStop or non-GamStop seems to be a key criteria that's used to try and draw consumers to those sites. Well, that's deliberately targeting some of the most vulnerable consumers that are out there, trying to get them to gamble on a site, that shouldn't be available. I think beyond that, it's bypassing regulation as well. So we've got a code of practice in place, which is all about maintaining proper standards across the industry. What you can't have is these, alternate websites that are out there and available that actually don't have these controls and measures in place that were there in the first place to protect consumers and keep crime out of gambling, and making sure that these sites aren't being used for serious crimes such as money laundering as well. So I think a big takeaway is it's not harmless crime, and it's exposing consumers to lots of risk. Alongside that, we are getting intelligence reports as well around level of payouts for some of these sites as well. So are the games that are on these websites, are they operating in a way that's legitimate? It's really difficult to assess that. You only have to look at things like, you have to upload your ID to some of these websites. You put in your payment cards on these websites. You've got no idea where your data's going. You don't know what controls and measures are in place around your own personal data. And is that leaving people potentially open to things like, identity theft as well, which you're seeing across other sectors? There's lots of things to consider there from a consumer harm perspective, that people just need to be mindful and aware of, and we would always say, go to the regulated sites. There's a reason why they're regulated, and we need to support that activity.
I think, like John said, we do get reports of people that have either intentionally or unintentionally accessed particularly remote sites, because some of them are quite sophisticated and it's not always obvious that they are not licensed. So we get complaints from people that have won and perhaps are having issues obtaining their winnings. And again, as John said, it's just they're not regulated, so we can't really attest to the fairness of them, and also undercutting legitimate businesses and also things like tax evasion as well.
Yeah, because if they're not licensed, then the money that's being gambled on those websites, that's not coming back into the economy. It's not part of the tax, is it? So
yeah, absolutely. That's a big element there. Obviously the economic impact is it's difficult to assess because there's obviously lots of different figures out there about the size and scale of what that market could look like. But I think all parties agree that it's there, and it has to be having some impact as well in terms of the wider sort of economy itself.
Definitely. So in terms of how you do this work, can you tell us a bit about sort of the disruption work and maybe the partnerships work that you do in your team? Yeah,
so there's been a real uptick in terms of activity, in this space, in terms of how we approach our disruption activity. So if we go back, 2 years ago, we would just send a cease and desist letter to an operator. The letter would say things like, we'll start disruption activity. One of the things I really wanted to change was the speed that we're reacting to some of these websites when we identify them. So we changed the response time from 14 days to 48 hours. Alongside that, we actually list some of the disruption activities that the team will undertake if they don't immediately stop what they're doing. So that's been a big change as well. So in terms of kind of how that work sort of developed, we've had to, work with some of the big, ISC providers for things like done great work with Google. We've extended that to Yahoo and Bing. So we're really trying to find different ways to try and disrupt how these sites present themselves to consumers, try and find ways to stop these websites from being accessed. And we're regularly publishing data now as well about, the total number of URLs that have been, reported to some of the big internet search engines. And also alongside that, some of our broader activity around, reporting to registrars, trying to get in touch with some of the domain providers as well. And, within it, we've seen some great results. There's one in particular where if we do a referral to a specific provider, it leads to a 90-day worldwide block on a specific website. So in terms of disruption, that's having a much wider impact beyond GB. So lots of work to do, lots of activity taking place, but I think we've made a really great start in terms of the work that the team are doing and the achievements that have been made so far.
The intelligence team have seen an increase in reports of unlicensed lotteries on social media platforms. This consists of probably the highest volume of intel we're getting over the last probably 6 to 12 months. And there's some weird and wonderful prizes on offer, which include a real human skull, an insect, and a tattoo, and also dog swimming lessons. But we're also seeing quite sophisticated lotteries where people are actually working shifts to manage the lottery. So it's 24 hours. And some prizes available are over a £600,000 house, motor vehicles. So we can see that there potentially are some links there with organised groups that are running these as a business. And we've had reports of people making over £1 million a year from these lotteries. But we have growing close relationships with social media platforms who, if we alert them to them, will do disruption tactics and take the sites down. It's not always easy because on some platforms, if the lotteries are live, once they've stopped recording, they're not available, then they're deleted from the platform. So we can't corroborate any intelligence we're getting. But yeah, we have good relationships with social media platforms working to disrupt and take those sites down, and the community groups there that are hosting these social media lotteries.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because having worked in a comms capacity for a long time, trying to get hold of a person at social media companies can be quite challenging at times. So it's a huge amount of work there just in building those relationships. But if there's an element of those sites being used to target and then to set up these lotteries, it's a really important place to be and to be present.
And it comes back to the point I said before about having that dedicated resource. So actually having the team available to look at trying to build up some of those relationships with which we have done with Meta, with X. We've got a relationship now with YouTube. So it means that when we do get these referrals in and we need to act quickly, we understand how to do those referrals, speedily, and try and get some action taken, when we do identify illegal gambling issues as well.
And the team will be looking proactively, the researchers and analysts on the team will be looking at any emerging trends, so any particular social media platforms that are being increasingly used to host things like social media lotteries, for example, any apps, sort of WhatsApp or group chats that are being used to host social media lotteries. So we're sort of on the forefront and looking sort of forward to see what the emerging issues are, so we can perhaps more proactively engage with the providers.
Yeah, so that was the next thing I was going to ask, really, is about sort of the payment providers and how you're working with those, but also, what's the long game with this? It's a huge piece of work. What are the challenges going to be, do you think?
So, obviously, just to start with the disruption side of things, what I really wanted to emphasise today, it's not a case of, that's the only activity that we're going to take. We've got that broad range of disruption work that we're doing, which does have, impact to a point. Where we've seen some real benefits have been sort of starting to grow our test purchasing activity. But to do that sort of work, we have to make sure we've got the right systems and technology in place. So the Gambling Commission's invested in systems that allow us to do these website reviews, undertake test purchasing activity where, we've got, outliers that we're not able to take down for whatever reason. That's where we're really focusing. And also making sure that we're trying to target the websites that we think are causing the most harm. So using access to information that, colleagues in Intel and research and stats are able to highlight, which of the websites that have got, huge or potential footprint from GB users, they're the ones that we really need to focus on through our work, because that's going to have the greatest impact in terms of trying to dampen down what's going on in terms of illegal activity. But yeah, in terms of like the investment side of thing, that's been really important to start taking that work forward. That's allowed us to then move into contact with, payment providers. We've already got a relationship set up with Visa, which means that once we can identify the relevant banking details behind a test purchase, we can start referring those details across to Visa. They're coming back to us now, and we're starting to get results around that, which is great. We've recently extended that to MasterCard as well. So I think that's going to have a real, strong impact if we can actually get some of these actual financial services surrounding illegal websites stopped or blocked or disrupted. That's going to have a real impact, I think, in the sort of midterm.
Yeah. You talked there about the messaging apps, and I know that there was a conversation within the organisation here the other day about actually the impact of messaging apps and how people are using them. I think we all get occasionally dropped into a group chat, don't we, on WhatsApp, other messaging platforms are available. What are you seeing around that then? Is the more going on there really with sort of illegal activity in those messaging apps?
So I'm happy to come in first on that. So the two we see definitely, WhatsApp and Telegram are the two where we sort of we're aware of lots of conversations about, bonus offers or access to illegal websites. We've got a case that the Gambling Commission's taken prosecution action from somebody based in our country that was utilising WhatsApp to take bets on behalf of other people, etc. So it's definitely going on. Again, the message out to consumers is, the example you gave there where you just added to a group, be very, very suspicious about that. Be really careful about, communication through some of those channels as well. I think the other message we wanted to get out there is, the case that we've prosecuted shows that, we are looking to take action where we can as well. It's not necessarily a closed group. So where we can take action against a specific, group that are operating in a manner that's illegal or on gambling, then, there is an appetite to do that as well.
We've talked about the fact that we're regulating in Great Britain, but the internet is a global thing. So this is a thing that's well beyond the confines of our own country. How are you working globally, and how are you working in an international capacity with this work?
I think this is a really important aspect to the work that's taking place. So there's been a legal markets working group has been set up through IAGA, which is looking at some of the issues that we're seeing globally. That group's been in place now for over 12 months, and I think the activity and outcomes from that group are starting to develop now. So it's the conversations were very much we were almost ahead a little bit with some of this work as well, and we seem to be, a lot of the conversations were around, how have you set that up, how have you got that relationship with Google set up, and actually trying to learn what we were doing. It's actually really starting to develop now, which is making it quite exciting from my point of view, because we're starting to look at how can we be more joined up, internationally. What's the information around some of these websites? Are they just targeting GB consumers? Are they targeting consumers in other jurisdictions as well? How can we work together to try and target some of that activity? And I think, a really good example of that, we've actually got colleagues over from the Netherlands in September for over 3 weeks, looking at how they're sort of targeting their illegal markets work, looking at how we're targeting our illegal markets work, but also trying to look to see, where is the crossover? Is there a case of that, the top 20 operators that we're seeing in our country, is that the same in other jurisdictions as well? So it's great to see how that work's starting to develop, and we're trying to, improve the intel flow that's coming from other countries as well. And, another point I wanted to make today was that what we don't want to see is licensed operators in our jurisdiction operating illegally elsewhere. And what we're starting to see now is other countries coming forward and, on the international scene to say, if they're seeing issues with any operators that have a license here, they're actually referring those cases across to us as well. So starting to see that work start to develop, and you're really looking forward to seeing where that's going to grow and develop over time.
And I'm currently working on a project to enhance and increase engagement with partner agencies within Great Britain as well. So we've got a plan, and whether it's as simple as people on the team going out to different agencies to give a presentation on the work we do, what our intel gaps are, what things we're looking at, all the way through to engaging with agencies so we can be made aware of active organised crime groups that are operating within the illegal market space, so we can perhaps have a more joined up and proactive approach to dismantling those. Also developing requests for information and intelligence flows, developing memorandums of understanding, information sharing agreements with partner agencies, including law enforcement as well. We're also looking at sharing our intelligence products that we're producing with our partner agencies, so we can make them aware of any emerging issues within the industry, any particular areas of risk or harm that we're interested in. And as I said, sharing our gaps in our intelligence picture with those agencies to see if we can work together to try and fill some of those gaps. So we've got a really rich intelligence picture of the issues and areas of risk.
Brilliant.
I think following on from that as well, industry have got their part to play with that. So we've frequently said, please submit intelligence to us if you're seeing issues around illegal markets activity, and that can range from, a website that's causing harm, or it could even be an illegal casino somewhere. But it's really important, given the work that Donna's team's doing, to try and understand, what the sort of intelligence picture looks like. It's really important that industry tell us what they're seeing and come forward with those specific examples as well, and that will then dictate. So we've got finite resource, we can't necessarily try and take on everything. What we need to do is look at the intelligence coming through. That will then determine where we need to focus our resources, and that's a step that I'm anticipating we're going to be taking in the future.
Yeah, and I suppose as well, with some of these, there must be an element where if you're building a website that's got some sort of game on it which is unlicensed, well, the supply chain involved in that, and there's been conversations around actually knowing those sort of supply chain relationships and disclosing those. So that's a part that industry can be more vigilant.
Absolutely. So again, we said frequently that a supplier can't have 1 foot in the regulated market and 1 foot out of it. I think where there is a risk and where we've seen sort of growing risks is around the presence of gambling games, for example, that are out. They can't be available in the legal market space. If we're regulating some of those, B2B or B2C suppliers. So, it's really important that everyone is, understands the importance of making sure that supply chains are fully auditable, making sure that there's absolutely no prospect of any products entering the legal market space. And alongside that, we'd say to all of our operators that you need to really start considering some of these things on your own sort of internal risk registers. There could be a point where if we identify really significant issue where a B2B provider is supplying a market illegally, we may take the decision to suspend or revoke a license, and that could have a real impact across the entire sector. So it's the approach is very much we're not going to tolerate it, and when we identify it, we will be taking action.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of this episode on the illegal market. In part 2, we'll hear more from John and Donna about their work. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. This is Inside the Commission, a Gambling Commission podcast. To stay up to date with the latest content, you can subscribe to our Gambling Commission YouTube channel, or you can find us on your preferred platform, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks for listening.